XconMedia.
Welcome to XconMedia. If you're new to the show, please like, comment, and subscribe. We collabing with my man Setbacks to Success.
What's good? What's happening? What's happening, everybody? Yeah, man, it's good to be seen. Good to see everybody. Yeah,
right.
God is good. I got no complaints, man. So, but yeah, man, I'm very, very much excited for tonight's episode.
That's right. We got a special guest. Now, some of us in the Atlanta area have seen her face on the news. So her name is Tamara Springs.
No, see, Tamara.
I just said it.
Said it.
Yeah. I just said it.
Said it. Like
Tamara Springs. Miss Tamara Springs, welcome. Okay. Quincy, what you got for me?
Yeah, so what we're gonna do before we start anything, we're gonna recap. This was a pivotal event that took place in Atlanta, took place throughout our nation, shocked everyone when it happened, and just out of kind of some sympathy, and again, I don't want. I know you hate reliving this moment because it was one of the most disgraceful, in my opinion, moments that took place in Atlanta's history. But anyway, we're going to run it back to recap the story of what took place in Atlanta about approximately 10 years ago. So, yeah,
it's
so
10 years.
That's right.
Ooh,
so
amazing. So we're going to start off with the video just to refresh everybody.
Yeah, so let's run it now.
Good evening. There's no harder lesson than the one taught today to 8 Atlanta educators by an angry judge after they were convicted on charges typically reserved for mobsters. He threw the book at them, teachers, principals among them, handing down lengthy prison sentences for their roles in a massive cheating scandal in which standardized test scores at underperforming schools were inflated. The judge told them the conspiracy harmed thousands of children. Our chief education correspondent, Rahema Ellis, shows us how it all played out.
This thing was pervasive. It's like the sickest thing that's ever happened to this town.
In a tense courtroom, Judge Jerry Baxter imposed harsh sentences on 8 former Atlanta public school educators convicted of racketeering, conspiring to fix standardized test scores to improve results.
There were thousands of children that were harmed in this thing. This is not a victimless crime.
3 disgraced educators, former teachers and administrators, were sentenced to 20 years, serving 7 in prison, the rest on probation. The others, including a principal and elementary school teachers, were sentenced to 5 years, serving 1 to 2 of them behind bars. Emotions ran high.
How can you say that?
As the sentences came down.
You sit down, I'm gonna put you in jail. If you yell at me, point at me.
It was painful for everyone, including the judge.
I consider you a wonderful educator, and that's what makes it so sad. You were under so much pressure.
Yes.
Yesterday, the judge heard from dozens of character witnesses pleading for leniency.
Have mercy on my daughter, please.
I'm giving you some opportunity.
And so Judge Baxter asked both sides to agree on a fair sentence that included admitting guilt. Otherwise, he would determine a punishment.
I've got the fair sentence in my mind, and it involves going to jail. All right.
Back in court today, only 2 decided to take the plea, which included home confinement or weekends behind bars. The judge admonished the rest.
All I want from any of these people is just to take some responsibility, but they refuse. And
today's sentencing also included community service and thousands of dollars in fines. While some criticized its severity, others said this cheating scandal shortchanged some of the city's most vulnerable children who are now years behind in their education. Lester?
Quite a
Man, I can't believe that. First, before you talk, man, before you say anything, that judge was nasty. He treated y'all like criminals, man. That's how you talk to people. He said that's one of the you mean to tell me all this stuff that happened in the city of Atlanta and that was the nastiest thing that he ever came across. Okay, I'm gonna just shut up right now. Okay, I forgot about that. I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. So, and I definitely don't want to make light of it because again, we're talking about real lives, real people affected. You know, I want to hold off my comments about what took place because I do have some deeply personal opinions about it. But again, I want to welcome Tamara to the show. Tamara, again, thank you for appearing this evening on our show. And just want to start here. Just want to, kind of now that this was, what year are we talking about now that this took place?
So my first trial, because there were two, I was acquitted of witness intimidation in 2014. And the witness that I supposedly intimidated was a woman who was an interim principal who was ineffective in the school that she had been placed in. And I made the recommendation that she go back to her old job. Not that she be fired, but that she come out of the interim principalship. Unfortunately, she was a Caucasian female, white woman, and she was in a predominantly black school, in fact, all black school, referring to children as those kids and you people. And I will tell you that that didn't set well with me. It didn't set well with the staff. And after months of coaching and trying to guide her and give her feedback, I made the decision to send her back to Buckhead, where she came from. So my first trial ended in acquittal, and it really was as a direct result of something that most people don't even know happened. In fact, until I got the discovery in my case, I didn't know it had happened. And that is that when she came to meet with me in my office to discuss her reassignment back, she recorded me. She had been wired up by the GBI and attempted to take the conversation off of her performance and wanted to talk about a falsified claim of me forcing principals to write a go to hell memo to the GBI, which wasn't true. It wasn't. There had been a meeting where I'd met with principals. It was a very stressful time. I told them to write an angry letter to whoever they were upset with. And I happened to have a little novelty pad of paper that I actually had gotten for a friend of mine who was battling cancer that worked in the school district. And that was her favorite phrase, go to hell. Rather than take the white piece of paper and the red markers in that I had for them to write whoever they were angry with so that they could move on, because that's a therapeutic exercise. I took, 12 sheets of paper in the room, and, we all had a good laugh. It took about 10 minutes. People wrote all kinds of things. One person, in fact, the woman who claimed I intimidated her, she actually wrote her letter to Sarah Palin and the Tea Party, because at the time, President Obama was running for office, and there was a lot of nastiness towards him. And one woman wrote her letter to her mortgage company, and a couple of people who had had really negative interactions with investigators who came into their schools and, they allegedly cursed at them or put guns on the table to intimidate them. They wrote, right? So when I was acquitted in 2014, I then was sent to a larger trial with the other 11 educators. 12 of us decided to not take deals and to stand in our innocence and our truth. And so when I went with the others, I was convicted of RICO. But what's interesting about that, first of all, they used the exact same witnesses, exact same evidence. And I say that with almost a tongue in cheek, because when I first heard I was being indicted on RICO, I remember thinking, well, I thought RICO, first of all, was for like mafia. And secondly, I thought you were supposed to get some money with RICO. What was interesting about my case that most people until now probably either missed or didn't recognize, but I guarantee you the prosecution knew it. I didn't have any principals that were indicted. Every principal in my region was cleared in the investigation.
Okay.
3 teachers in my region. 3. There were almost 1,900, close to 2,000 folks that were in the region of schools I supervised, because my job was to train and supervise principals. So imagine all my principals being cleared, 3 teachers, changed answers. Their principal was not indicted, but I was. But more importantly, in 8 years of working in the Atlanta public schools, I never got a bonus money a penny of bonus money, because when the superintendent at the time, Dr. Beverly Hall, set up the structure for performance bonuses, she left executive directors of schools out of it. So I got no money. I'd never seen a test up close and personal. All my folks were cleared because my reputation was pretty consistent. Like, I didn't play the radio. If you didn't do your job, like, I didn't care like who you were. My mother was a teacher at one point, and I remember telling my principals, if my mother doesn't do her job, I'll fire my own mother. Like, it's not personal. It's about these children. So, I probably popular. In fact, during my trial, that they brought people, that had been written up. One principal had 37 memos, sat on the stand and said that he had never seen pieces of paper that he had signed, never seen emails that his email exchange was copied in. And so it became sort of a retribution campaign. But for me, I could never take the plea deal that was offered for one reason and one reason only. I was like, well, with whom did I RICO? Like, if you're going to accuse me of something, I don't have anybody. What they did was they in the investigative report, they listed a school as SRT4, which was my region, with an egregious allegation that a principal wore white gloves and all of that. She wasn't my principal. She worked in SRT1. She worked for Dr. Sharon Davis Williams. She wasn't mine. So when we got to court and they realized that they had wrote up the report in error, they didn't fix it. They didn't say, oh, our bad. We made a mistake. You can go ahead and go home, Miss Cotman. They drugged me through hell, mostly because I stood my ground. Like, I'm never gonna admit to something I didn't do. That is there's a documentary that came out in 2019 when I was in prison called One Child Left Behind. And I said in that documentary then, and I mean it to this very day, before I say something I didn't do and cop to something I didn't do, I'll die first. I will die before I admit to something I didn't do. When you know I didn't do it, you have evidence I didn't do it, you have proof, and you still want to punish me. Let me tell you something. It's a special place in hell for people like that. So, was it painful? Yes. People ask me all the time, well, don't you wish you were taking a deal? Well, some people are willing to sell their integrity. Mine is not for sale. Because at the end of the day, we all have a bill to pay at the end of life. Everything we do on this earth, we have to give an account for.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the strength, courage to revisit this again. I know this is a life-changing moment. Me also being a former school teacher and educator. Some people, and I won't say this, I'll say this lightly, but some people are living the type of lifestyle that justifies that at some point, they're going to end up incarcerated or end up, with some charges. There's just certain professions, street professions to begin with. Not trying to make light of it, but they tell you you're going to end up dead, or you're going to, or go to prison, and so, but teaching is not one of them. And so, as an educator, this is because I want to get into, a little bit about what happened specifically, but also, regardless of where this ends, or what actually happens. And I know your position on it, because I don't want you to really talk about the other people involved and whether they actually did it or not. But my ultimate opinion about it is that regardless what someone actually did or agreed to or cop to, the end result was the penalty was like, what are we talking about? We're talking about RICO charges. We're talking about, time in state prison. Like, how, give me your thoughts about that, because it's, if anything, it's just a fireable offense. G, and you could step in on this before Tamara jumps in if you want. But are we talking about like legitimately? Does this really on any level deserve state or federal prison time? On just your take on it, did it deserve that?
So I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of evidence that I think will if nothing else, leave people pensive about this case. For one, when I was indicted on Good Friday in 2015, 2013. First of all, I never expected to be indicted because I hadn't changed any answers. I hadn't participated in cheating, covered up cheating, none of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I thought was interesting is my initial bond, and most people have forgotten this. My initial bond was $4.8 million. The superintendent's bond was $7.5 million. All of the teachers and principals had $1 million bonds, and it was a cash bond. Now, my attorney and the attorney of other people stayed at the jail all night to work to get that bond down. But what I can tell you is I watched the news at one point. I don't really watch it a whole lot now because it's too depressing. But I saw people murder people and they didn't have $4 million bonds. And so that should have been people's first clue that like something isn't right. But the goal with the high bonds was to force us to take plea deals immediately. Like I'm clear on that now. I didn't understand like the strategy behind it, but I think they thought, okay, we're just going to scare these educators and they're going to be so scared. They're going to go in there and sign this piece of paper. And that's it. We're going to get them to do it. Because the people who had actually investigated us had done that. Mike Bowers, who at one point was the attorney general in Georgia, had locked up a whole group of people in Taliaferro County who were on the county commission when they refused to allow a landfill to be built in a predominantly Black community. He put them in jail until they signed, because there is a statute in the state of Georgia that says that anytime a landfill is put in an existing community, that the county or city commission has to agree that it's in the best interest to put that trash dump in someone's backyard. Right. I mean, if you know anything about science, you put a trash dump in a neighborhood, you contaminate the water, underground. The EPA person, the head of Georgia, EPA, refused to sign. The commissioners refused to sign. EPA director got fired, blackballed, never worked again in that field in Georgia. And those commissioners were sent to jail. They only could come out when they signed the piece of paper that Mike Bowers wanted them to sign. Mike Bowers was the lead investigator on the case. He had done that before. Now, how do I know that? I wasn't here when that happened. I didn't live in Georgia. But somebody mailed that to my house in an unmarked envelope so that I would know what I was dealing with.
Wow. Okay.
So the game doesn't change, the players do, right? They were just looking to try things they had done before in the state to people. You look at what just happened with Young Thug and Rico, right? People writing rap lyrics and they looking at 40 and 60 years in prison because they wrote about something they may or may not have even seen or done, right? So how do I feel about that? Here's how I feel about that. When you think about what the consequences were, like I was given a 20-year sentence and then, it was later reduced to 10. But at the end of the trial, they told us that our community service was to go to the King Center, as in Dr. Martin Luther King, and run an after-school tutoring program for children. Now, I'm sorry, maybe it's just me and my logic, but if you want to accuse me of harming children, why is my community service to go work for free as like an indentured servitude slave in an after-school program, build it from the ground up because it didn't exist? And by the way, the program was $20 million. That's what was in the budget for that program at the King Center. And I remember saying, I did an interview with T.I. a couple of years ago when I first came home from prison. The first interview I ever did, and I haven't done a whole lot since because this is very painful to relive. But it's time to get this story out.
Right.
Imagine this. I said this on his show. I have never ever heard, and I'm not being funny when I say this, and this may hurt. I've never heard of somebody who robbed Wells Fargo being told to go volunteer at the vault. You understand? You understand?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but yeah, you right.
What kind of monkey business nonsense is that, right?
Right.
But you want to send me to volunteer to educate children that you falsely claimed that I hurt. But let me get to the real problem with this case.
Yes.
Most people do not know that cheating is not a crime. There's no statute for cheating. That's why we're charged with RICO. Because I'm going to tell you something. I'm not trying to get in nobody's business or marriage, but it's a lot of people in this world cheating. I just can't tell you how many men and women I know will be serving life sentences for serial cheating. If cheating were in fact a crime. Look for it on the statutes. You will not find it.
You won't find it.
Yeah, deep. This
I
is
got one quick question.
yeah, go ahead, bro. Go ahead, man. Jump right on in. And everybody, thank you for tapping in. And again, please like, comment, share. And today we need people tapped in on this. This is very important topics. Jeez, I'm sorry. My apologies. Go ahead, bro.
No problem. Who was the prosecutor on this case? Who's the lead prosecutor?
Well, I will tell you that the prosecutor on this case, the lead prosecutor. So Paul Howard was the DA when we were charged. He made the decision because DAs are the most powerful people. They determine who gets charged and who doesn't. But the DA that prosecuted, the lead prosecutor, was a woman named Fonnie Willis. She's been, she's pretty infamous now. But we were her litmus test for RICO charges to see if it worked. Right now they got these people out here protesting Cop City in Atlanta. They living out there saying, you don't need to be building a training facility for cops. You need to be teaching cops how to be more humane. All those people now have RICO charges. Okay. You got rappers, RICO. I mean, really anybody can get a RICO, kind of like Oprah Winfrey, and you get a car and you get a car. You get a RICO. You get a RICO. In Atlanta, anybody can get a RICO.
Only in Atlanta, seems like. Wow. And my thing is, she not even all the way right herself, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. So, again, yeah. So much to dial in and tap into. And again, you have full discuss in this how you want to discuss it. This is our platform. I share it with G Money and so just take us further. Like, so, given, why was this so excessive? What, in your opinion, what was the reason why? What was the motive behind making this case so public and the punishment so excessive for everyone involved?
Well, I will tell you, I just finished my book. I finished it about 6 months ago. And I talk in that book. It's called Sordid Injustice, a memoir of courage, conviction, and the misuse of RICO. And I put a couple of theories that I believe are out there. But I will tell you that politics played a huge role in this case. And my example of politics is this. The former governor of Georgia testified against me twice in both trials. In the first trial, I remember my attorney asking him, Governor Perdue, do you know Tamara Cotman? It's in the transcript. And he actually said on the stand, well, I don't know that I don't know her, but I may have been in a room with her once. And my attorney said, but you don't actually know her and you're testifying today. And he said, well, I'm here to talk about Beverly Hall, because there was a real issue between he and Dr. Hall, which, you can read about that in my book. But bottom line is, he was right. We had been in the same room. As I reflected, at some point in maybe 2008 or 2007, I went to the Teacher of the Year banquet because one of my teachers was recommended. And it was at the Georgia World Congress Center. And he was on the stage, and the Secretary of Education for Georgia, a woman named Kathy Cox, was on the stage. Beverly Hall was on the stage. And I was in the back of the room because I was late because I was a single mom. I was a single mom, and I had to feed my son. And so I got there about 5 or 6 minutes after the program started. So I sat in the back. There were about 400 people in the room. And I remember thinking, wow, how did he get to be a credible witness when he was in a room with me in the very front and I was in the very back? I thought that a witness was something who actually saw something, right? That's what I thought that a witness was. But at no point when he sat on that stand did anybody say, oh, we need to, you know what, Governor, thanks for coming, but we need to not have this part of the record because you don't actually know the woman, which means you really can't testify. They allowed him to testify not once, but twice in both my trials. He never met me. So that doesn't tell you what kind of politics was at play in the game against us. I don't know what does, because I've never, ever, before our trial and not since, ever seen a former governor come on the stand as a star witness. That's what he was billed as, and testify against a woman he'd never met. So lots of political reasons. If you go right now, if you look at if you were to take a map and you were to look at the belt line in Atlanta, which is now, it used to be, poor, dilapidated houses, subject to gentrification now, houses that used to be $47,000 are now $467,000.
More than that.
And if you draw a pin, put a pin, like a push pin on the map of all the schools that were charged with cheating, they're all on the belt line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. It's deep. And so, and again, thank you for sharing everything that you've shared thus far. At this point, what does the, this point, well, let me just go back a little bit, because initially they sentenced you to 20 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were given a 20-year sentence. Yeah. And this is not
20 to serve.
20 to serve, is that correct? Or
it was 20 with 10 to serve initially, and then they reduced it with 10, 3 to serve, and 7 on probation.
Okay, and these were not Fed charges; these are state charges that they were.
No, I went to state prison. In fact, they were very intentional about putting me in a maximum security prison in the lifers dorm. I often wondered if they wanted me to be murdered while I was in there. I don't really know what the strategy was. I mean, the reality is I can coexist with a rattlesnake if it stays in the corner and knows I'll kill it if it comes near me.
Exactly.
So I didn't have a problem with the lifers. In fact, some of the women who I really, have an affection for are in there for crimes of murder, right? They did it. Like that's the one thing I tell people when I talk about it is you can find a lot of honesty in prison. People will tell you, God had to sit me down, or I did that, or they'll say, well, I didn't do that, but I did some other stuff I got away with, and they don't say stuff, right?
Yeah, right.
So they put me in maximum security prison where I volunteered to help people learn how to read, and I befriended people, and actually, there's a lot of women out here. I have friends that are doing life. They'll probably never come home, but if they do, and I got a problem, I can make a phone call for a turkey sandwich and a Coca-Cola.
No,
they'll handle it. I ain't got to worry.
Yeah. I feel you. Yeah. And again, just I'll insert this because again, school teachers, we're talking about changing test scores of students or answers of students, and again, there's this no in no shape, sense, form, or fashion is going to state prison maximum security a justifiable sentence. And again, I know you're not admitted to any guilt related to it, but there's no way, and that's a justifiable sentence for something of that nature. I mean, like I said, at the very most, we're talking about getting fired from your job if that is the case, indeed the case for anybody involved. G, you got some on that? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I have to say, we ain't talking about no career criminals. We're not talking about people with a record. They're teachers. They didn't have a record.
Yeah.
They have no record. I did time myself, and I know of a lot of people that did a lot worse and didn't get as much as y'all. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, I think everyone nationwide and definitely in our communities should be outraged by something like this. We should continue to be outraged like this, and we should not forget about, this event taking place, because if it happened once, it can happen again, and we should never allow, our educators or people who are truly doing something, worthwhile to benefit, members of our community. We should never allow them to be punished in this type of fashion. Maximum security prison is just not acceptable. But anyway, that's just my take on it. Where you at on that, Jim?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I'm friends with a pioneer, I really think, in reform. Her name is Tanae Jenkins, and Tanae and I were talking one day. She said, Tamara, you need to remind people they need to stop locking up people because they're mad at them. Like, they were mad at me. I'm going to tell you why they were mad at me. When I stood for that first trial and I won, there were 35 people that were originally indicted. Now, I want you to remember, they said, cheating was widespread and all these, but they only indicted 35 people. 35 out of, I don't know, 9,000 employees in Atlanta Public Schools.
Yeah. Right.
So how widespread is anything if you indict 35 people? Okay. First and foremost. Secondly, when I stood and refused not only to take a plea deal, but my lawyer, when he opened my personnel contract, he requested a copy of my contract from Atlanta Public Schools and from my previous school district, Wichita Public Schools, because I actually got recruited to come from Wichita Public Schools, where I was an area superintendent. I didn't plan to come down here and get killed, essentially have my career just assaulted, my integrity. But he said to me, Ms. Cotman, he said, I just went through your personnel file. There's nothing in there but contracts. He said, have you ever been written up for anything? I said, oh, no, sir. I wrote people up. I didn't get written up. Okay. No. I live by the book. No, you won't. I mean, if you had to report at 8:00, I was there at 7:42. Like, I was always the person, and I joke, I went to Langston University. It's an HBCU in Oklahoma. Right. I graduated from college. I still cannot play cards, and I never smoke weed. I think that's kind of weird to graduate from an HBCU and people say, you want to play spades?
Mm-hmm. I got no idea.
Right? Because I was always like a by the book person. My father raised us like that. So, my mother too, but my father was like very much military guy, no nonsense. And so I grew up like that was my professional, mantra. Right. So to have never been written up for anything and go to prison for wrongdoing I didn't do, it was almost like, imagine being in a restaurant and you're sitting and you're eating your food and there's somebody across from you and they get up and walk out and they don't pay their bill. And then somebody comes over to your table and says, hey, that person got up and didn't pay their bill. You knew or should have known they didn't pay their bill, and now you have to pay their bill. Because that's what the investigators said. And well, you knew or should have known about cheating. And I'm like, first of all, most of the people who cheated will tell you they took the test home. They snuck, one guy, and I kept praying he would come to court because I wanted to see it. He was like, yeah, I cut the test open and I burnt them. I used the lighter to burn the plastic back and seal it. And I remember thinking to myself, I remember being a kid making a grilled cheese sandwich and the Wonder Loaf bread got too close to the stove. It didn't even get the heat and it got so crinkled. Like you knew that I had been too close to the heat, just not even touching it. I remember thinking, right. I want to see that magic trick. How did he says he cut the test open. He took him out. He changed the answers. He crawled in the ceiling. Okay. And then he sealed it back and nobody could tell. I'm like, I don't know about that because plastic that's had contact with heat. I'm not a scientist. But I know that it doesn't look the same, right? So I don't know how much of what people shared was embellished. What I do know that everybody who cheated, who admitted to cheating, also the same thing. They did it clandestine. People were taking tests out on the weekends. Well, I don't work in a school on the weekends. How would anybody know? If people want to do something illegal or unethical, they do it. That doesn't mean that that's awarded. And I remember telling my attorney, I said, why didn't anybody ask them what would have happened to you if your executive director would have known that you were cheating? Because I'm pretty sure they would have been like, I'd have got fired. Yeah, because we weren't down with the foolishness. Like there was nobody that blatantly walked around like, yeah, I cheated. Yeah, I did that. Right. Your monkey behind would have found some other place to work. I don't care how people feel about Beverly Hall. People can say what they want, but I will tell you this about that woman. She was a shoot first and ask questions later kind of chick. If she thought you did something wrong, she would fire you. And if she had to hire you back on a technicality, she would. Now, that is what I can tell you working in 8 years in Atlanta Public Schools. I had 4 cases of cheating. That's the thing that's crazy. In my 8 years, I had 4 different cases of cheating. In every one of those cases, those people were recommended for termination or suspension. They were all referred to the Professional Standards Commission. That was on the record. But do you think that they allowed that to come into court? The DA's office in Atlanta buried those facts. So you're going to accuse me of being a person who turns a blind eye to cheating, but then you got to explain how I have 4 people in my region over 8 years who did something stupid and they don't work here anymore. Or they got 40-day suspensions without pay.
Gotcha.
So, none of when you look at this case from a logical perspective, it doesn't really make sense because it was more of a political statement and like an exercise of power and really punitive, because what happened when I stood, they started offering misdemeanor plea deals to everybody else. Now, I asked my attorney how common that was. We had felony charges. They issued out bulk copy. If you go and look at the plea deals, they say the same thing. They change the names. In fact, some of them they kept the names. They cut and pasted the same plea deal. They started offering misdemeanor plea deals on felony charges because they did not want anybody else to win their trial.
Yeah.
That's how we got from 35 to 12. Everybody else took plea deal.
Yeah.
Some of those people who cheated are teaching children again today.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank again. Again, there's a lot to unpack here, and I know we can go a long time with this, but fast forward into the day, give us, how have you come to, assess all this? How have you come to kind of grapple with what's happened? What would you like our audience, this platform who's tuned in right now, to learn or from this? I will say that I think you guys should be vindicated somehow. I think the city should take a stance on that, starting with this top leadership to do that, because again, the time if we're going to just kind of, the time did not fit the crime in my humble opinion. And so, but at this point in life, what have you come to understand from this, and what would you like for our audience to understand about it moving forward?
I think what I've come to understand are a couple of things. One, that the trials are not about facts. Okay. If it was about the facts, I would have never been indicted. I never should have been indicted. But I think also I now am a credible messenger around some collateral consequences. I don't think people understand that when you have a felony on your record, your life is never the same.
Right.
I could not rent an apartment in a professionally managed unit after I was convicted. And I have a son. My son is disabled now. He got sick with schizophrenia right as this was happening. He was 19 years old. Had a complete schizophrenic breakdown. And we lost our home. Okay. We lost our home. I lost my car, because when you're sitting in trial every day, you can't really hold a job. And so I was looking for an apartment. I was pulling money out of my retirement, trying to survive. Ended up using all of that to live. And I kept getting denied for an apartment, and I couldn't figure out why, because they said we were first-time offenders.
Right.
But a friend of mine worked in an apartment complex, and she looked it up, and she's like, "Oh, Tamara, I see everything. It says RICO." She's like, "You will never be able to live in a professionally managed apartment." She said, "But there's hope for you." And I was like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah. If you go up Old National, none of those places are professionally managed, and you could probably get a unit on Old National." And I was like, "Old National? Old Natal?" I said, "Oh, no, ma'am. My son, because my son walks with his mental illness, he walks."
Yeah.
And I was like, "My baby will be on crack. They will turn my child out." No. But that's what I was left with, a choice to rent an apartment on Old National, not to mention my job prospects. I have 3 degrees. I speak Spanish fluently. I couldn't be a teacher's aide after this. They stripped me of my expired license. My license expired in 2015. I let it lapse because I never wanted to go in education again. I was so distraught. But in 2017, to further humiliate me, they revoked a license that had expired for 2 years. So I can't ever, do my job again. I was an Uber driver until they had a couple of, kind of off Uber drivers. And then they started doing background checks. And with RICO, I look like a threat. Like, I look like I'm a gangster. And so, my job prospects were limited, my income. And so I began to understand why people go back to prison, right? You come home, you have no hope. You can't work. You go back to the hustle. And I'm going to tell you, if I was not a woman of integrity, the stuff I learned in prison, I could have come home and been a different person. Right. I could have been a real gangster. Okay. Yeah. But that's not who God has me to be. But I will tell you, your life is never the same with a felony. The work that I do now, I work for the largest reentry organization in America. It's called Center for Education Employment. And I'm a training manager. I run an internship program that helps justice impacted people come home, rebuild their lives, develop professional skills. And for 16 weeks, I train them along with a small team of really talented people. And we turn them loose into the workforce so that they can survive when they come home. But I'll tell you, there's also this need for like mental health support, because I don't care if you were in prison for a day or 9,000 days. When you come home, you're not right up here. You can't unsee some of the things you've seen. Right. I will never forget watching a whole woman's face get sliced off on the compound because her girlfriend was mad at her, and she got a razor blade and sliced her. I mean, if you can imagine somebody's face hanging off, like I can't unsee that.
See that, right?
I cannot unsee some of the stuff I've seen.
Yes.
And so when I came home, I sat in therapy for a year, trying to make myself whole again. Because I'm going to tell you, I came home angry. Quincy will tell you.
Right.
I was so angry when I came home because I could not believe what those people had gotten away with.
Mm-hmm.
But what I know is you might get by, but you don't get away. And what I want people to know is that this criminal legal system is not honest. There's a lot of dirty players in it, but that the truth always comes to light. And when it does, they cannot run. They cannot hide. And then when people come home from prison, they need a chance. Yes. I help people every single day reclaim their voice. When I came home from prison, I didn't speak for 5 years about this. I told you I did an interview with T.I., but if you watch the interview, I look like I am shell-shocked. I watched it for the first time. I look like somebody that just came home from war because I got home in January. I recorded that in April. And I looked at myself and I was like, oh, God, I look like I'm shell-shocked. And I will tell you that my work, we help people get jobs, but getting a job is not enough. There is a whole healing that has to take place when people come home from incarceration. And we're not real good in the African-American community about seeing about our mental health.
What you talking about? Speak on that. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Let me tell you something. I could have come home when I was in prison. I'm gonna tell you this, and it's kind of funny, but it's kind of sad.
Yes.
There was an officer that used to, because they moved me around to 3 different prisons. There's only 4 women prisons in Georgia. I was in 3 of them. But I was at this place called Pulaski State Prison, which is near Hawkinsville, Georgia. And on Friday nights, this officer would play movies. Like I guess he would get DVDs or whatever. And so this movie came out one night, and it was a movie called Peppermint. And I remember like watching Peppermint. And if you've never seen Peppermint, I'm gonna give you the cliff notes. It's about a woman who's wronged by the criminal legal system. She disappears for 5 years and she comes back on a retribution campaign. She kills everybody. She kills the judge. She kills the lawyers. She kills the people who killed her. Her husband and child got murdered by some gang members. She strings them up from a telephone line like Christmas tree ornaments. So, I'm watching this in prison on a Friday night, and all of a sudden I'm thinking that this is like God telling me to come home and be a black peppermint. Right?
No.
He
said, you think this is the message from God to tell you to come home?
Wow.
I got to check that movie out.
Because let me tell you something. When you go to prison for something you didn't do, you at least want to go to prison for something you did do, right?
I just said this.
You just hit
I just said this. Yeah. It's always better for 25 guilty people to get away than it is for one person that did not do what they say they did to go in. You know what I'm saying? And like you said, the criminal justice system is very corrupt at a high level. It's crazy. So,
and let me just put a disclaimer, because I don't want somebody to watch this and say, "Oh, she's threatening people." I'm telling you what my psyche was. Okay,
what your psyche was. Yes.
Okay, my psyche in there was come home, and get people back for what they did to me. Now, is that where I am now? No, I have a God I serve that I still serve, even though I felt like he kind of set me up on that deal. But I also am not in that headspace. But let me tell you, it's a thin line between sanity and insanity.
Yes.
It's very thin. And I could have easily crossed that line and come home a much different person.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want people to walk away with.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
Because when that was going on, I was just coming home myself. You know what I'm saying? From doing a 16-year sentence. Oh, I did what I did. You know what I'm saying? But I know for the things that y'all went through, no record, like no evidence really. You know what I'm saying? A lot of hearsay, and we talking about a RICO, no criminal history. We talking about a RICO case.
And no money. Don't forget no money, brother.
No money. Like, it's pathetic. And I talk about the criminal justice system. I don't know how it's gonna get overhauled. I don't know if it's gonna get overhauled in his lifetime, but it's very corrupt. It is
Okay.
very, very corrupt.
G, I want to ask you a real quick question, and then Tamara, I want to go back to you to tell everybody about your book and what you got going on. But G, real quick, I want to ask you, how does the state of Georgia, how does Atlanta, in your opinion, make something like this right with these individuals?
Well, I was gonna say, I was gonna ask what happened to the case when it went to the Court of Appeals. I know that was a whole different story because I myself, I experienced that the Court of Appeals. See, what they had me charged with, what they say I did, they really couldn't prove it. They had a lot of circumstantial evidence, but not really too much direct evidence. But when I got to the Court of Appeal, they kind of swept it under the rug in an unpublished decision, I might add, because you can't even find a decision to my case. It just said affirm, unpublished decision. You know what I'm saying? So did you go through I went through the whole process, petition for writ of certiorari, habeas corpus. It took me about 12 years to realize I'm not gonna get his time back, even though my lawyer admitted he wronged my case. So I ended up doing the whole thing. So where do you stand on like your appeal? Like, how did that go for you?
Yeah. So let me tell you, remember earlier I said, politics was prevalent in this case.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were convicted in 2015 on April Fool's Day, which, again, these days are crazy because I was like, is this a joke? It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
We got appeal bonds and I stayed home until October the 1st, 2018, fighting. So I went to the Georgia Court of Appeals. My lawyer filed a double jeopardy case, which seemed to make sense because I've been tried twice with the same evidence and the same witnesses. He also brought up the reality that with RICO, you're supposed to have 2 predicate acts. Well, I had been found not guilty of witness intimidation, so they didn't even have the 2 predicate acts to continue to charge me, but they still took me back to trial. Paul Howard said they were going to get 2 bites at the apple. So Georgia Court of Appeals never even addressed the issues in my letter. In fact, if you go and read it, I was looking to see like what was going on in the appeals court because I had a panel of 3 judges. And when the 3 judges heard my case, because we were granted oral arguments, which is kind of rare. We went down, I had my attorney and people there. I only had two judges that showed up. The 3rd judge wasn't there, but they sat on my case for a long time. And then in June of 2018, all 3 of my judges got promotions. When Trump came in as president, he got rid of all of the federal appeals judges, which opened up positions in Georgia. Those positions are nominated by senators. And David Perdue, who's the cousin of Sonny Perdue, nominated 2 of my 3 judges to be federal court appeals, which are appeals court judges, which are lifetime appointments, by the way. So this is all where they're deciding my case. On the 3rd judge, he was named the Supreme Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court. So all 3 of the judges on my case got interesting promotions. When I asked my lawyer, because I got word of it, and I said, how is it possible that 2 judges, there were only 2 federal openings in the state of Georgia. What are the chances that both of those positions would have been filled from judges from the same bench? And he said, well, let me put it to you like this, Ms. Cotman. There's 4,000 attorneys in the state of Georgia. Anybody who's an attorney could be nominated. Usually there are judges who wait their entire lives for that. Your judges had less than 5 years of experience on the court. They were new judges, but they got these lifetime appointments. I said, so what does that mean? He said, well, how likely are you to get struck by lightning twice? And I was like, see, I didn't understand the politics. So fast forward, it went to My case went to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the Georgia Supreme Court sent back a one phrase statement: the writ of motion is denied, no explanation. When the appeals court heard it, they wrote back a 47-page summary that looked like it was copied and pasted from the indictment. It started off with, in 2010, Governor Sonny Perdue launched an investigation. It's almost the exact wording from the indictment. They never addressed my concerns. They all got promotions. I'm not saying it's related. I'm not making allegations I can't prove. I'm just saying it's interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. Maybe some people are just lucky like that. Mm-hmm. But when the Supreme Court got my case, they sent back a one-word phrase: the writ of motion is denied. Now, this is where politics gets interesting. The person in the White House at the time had nominated and selected former Governor Perdue. He was the Secretary of Agriculture at the time. He was the cabinet. Somebody took a picture of a certain African-American Supreme Court justice in the office with the president, and they sent it to me in an encrypted message. And I was like, what is this for? And that was about 3 weeks before I got the notice on October 1st that the Supreme Court had opted not to hear my case. I don't know how that works, but from what I understand, if a judge chooses not to support hearing the case, then they don't hear it. They have to unanimously support, I guess. But I thought it was interesting that this particular individual was snapped, just he and the president. Why the person, it was almost like I got a heads up, like, this isn't going to end well for you, sister. I found out that I was going to prison on October 1st. I was sent to prison on October the 9th. I had 8 days to put my personal affairs in order, to figure out what to do with my son. 8 days. Some people have months to prepare. I had 8 days to figure out what to do and turn myself into to Rice Street, Fulton County Jail. So what happened? Nobody wanted to touch it. I just believe it was just, I believe in politics because my father, and my father was a politician. He was a senator in Kansas. He said to me one time, he said, baby, this thing is so dirty and it goes so high up. He said, nobody wants to touch it, Tamara. He said, I've made phone calls. I've talked to people that I know. He's like, nobody wants to touch it. It's just so dirty. And I think that's what happened. I think the Supreme Court's just, it's easier to write writ of motion is denied and you don't have to explain anything. We're not going to hear it. We just want to hear it. And so that's what happened. So I went to prison because nobody would take up my case.
Gotcha. Yeah. So again, thank you for sharing all that. Also, I want to take an opportunity for anyone who's still tuned in, still listening, still has an interest in some of the atrocity, the injustice that was done here. I want to just automatically suggest that you reach out to Tamara directly. She's going to talk about her book. I want you to get, let's get and rally behind her. Let's show her that, we're not going to stand for this thing. Invite her. If you're a celebrity, you have a great you have a huge platform, invite her on your show. Joe Rogan, if you tapped in, get her on a show. Let's blow her up. Let's blow this story up. Let's support those people like Tamara who has been wrong. Let's make this right. And if the city's not going to do it, we're going to do it, in our universe and social media and YouTube land as well. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. G, you got something to say about it before we go talking about a book?
Yeah, make sure you get that link in there so I can put the link in the bio. Because we got a few people in here tonight, but it's gonna get some plays, and I want to make sure that people can find your book, support you. You know what I'm saying? And I got a question. Probation wise, are you still on paper?
Yeah.
Is there any way, because I know sometimes you pay the fines off and the probation goes unsupervised. Is there anything that can get the sentence cut short? Because see, once you get off that paper, you can get a pardon. You know what I'm saying?
So I'm almost done. Like it ends in September for me. I'm almost at the end of the road.
Okay, cool.
So it does nothing. I've been unsupervised for a while because to have somebody peeing in a cup every month who has never done drugs is almost crazy. And I think over time, when I got to my 8th parole officer, I think they were like, this lady is just not gonna mess up. I went from checking in to calling in to just like an officer that said, whatever you do, don't get rearrested. And I was thinking to myself, buddy, you have a better chance of being arrested than I do. I drive under the speed limit. I don't drink. I'm very protective of my freedom because I know that somebody in downtown Atlanta would love to snatch it for something stupid. And so, but in September, I'm done. I'm going to be able to walk away and, get that piece of paper that says I'm, off parole. But yeah.
My advice would be, like, they tell you that you have to wait 5 years unless you got, probably your career would be able to get you into the parole board. That's something that you could do online. I help you with that because I received a pardon 6 years after I got out. You know what I'm saying? So, but in your circumstances, with you being still an educator, you know what I'm saying? Even though they try to take it from you, you're gonna always be an educator. You know what I'm saying? And go back, get your pardon, get them to acknowledge that your time is served and forgiven and gone with your life. You know what I'm saying? And
honestly, I'm gonna tell you something. I appreciate that. I'm not interested in a pardon. I want my name cleared. They destroyed my good name.
Yeah.
Would that be expungement? Is that what you're looking for to have it? What are you talking
really
about?
I want
vindication.
A conviction integrity unit to take a look at this case. That's what I want. Now, is that going to happen with the people in office in Fulton County? No, because they did it, and they're not going to turn over their own rocks. But I really believe that if anybody who's not affiliated with Fulton County, even at the federal government, comes in and looks at this case, they will be like, what in the name of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph happened? And people will, I just believe that. Like, you can't justify what you did to me and other innocent people all your life. And when a conviction integrity unit of any kind looks at this case, it'll be like what happened with the Central Park 5. They went from Central Park 5 to exonerated 5. It took 14 years.
Listen, that'll be something. You definitely got the right administration in there, because who better than to see this story than the current president of the United States? You know what I'm saying?
Well, he's always talking about weaponizing the criminal, the legal system against people.
Right.
That is exactly what happened in the Atlanta Public Schools trial.
Right. Yeah. So who understand better than him? You know what I'm saying? So we can get on up to the White House. That's something to bring to him. I'm trying to get there. I promise you I am.
Like, comment, share. Let's get this out to the people who are in positions to make those decisions. Like, comment, share to those individuals. Now, Tamara, talk to us. Take us out. Tell us about your book.
Yeah. So you can go to my website.
It's
called courageouslyshe.com.
Okay.
The book actually drops in 8 days on May 16th. You can pre-order your copy. It is available on Amazon, Lulu, Barnes and Nobles on Juneteenth, June 19th, the Day of Freedom for Black people. I was intentional about that date. My book is coming out because I think that prison is just the vestiges of slavery. It's a way for them to, get free labor and lock people up and run that prison industrial complex, the pick that makes some people very wealthy on the expense of others. And courageouslyshe.com is where you can find it. It's called Sordid Injustice, a memoir of courage, conviction, and the misuse of RICO. You can book me for speaking engagements, book signings. It's taken me a long time to tell this story. I started writing this book in prison, and it's taken a long time.
Hey man, I'm glad I'm glad you did it. I'm so glad, and thank you for your courage and sharing that. Again, we're gonna have the book in our description and in both of our video uploads on it.
What's the website?
Yes, it will have the website as well. Again, we encourage everyone, please get behind this sister, support, share this story. Let's make sure these tragedies don't happen again to our leaders in our community, our educators, and this type of injustice, this type of sordid injustice never happens again. Thank you. G, I'm going to close this out. Looks like we're running about an hour right now. You good with that? You got anything else?
The justice system is very corrupt. This right here is the top of is corrupt. This is the top of it, because we talking about, again, people that didn't have any type of criminal record, and they got thrown in there with people that have done the worst of the worst. You know what I'm saying? This justice system is corrupt. It needs to be fixed. It needs an overhaul. This is the people do not want to get out and vote, but them people down there in Fulton County is democratically ran. And this is why, you know, this a whole nother subject, but this is why I stopped voting for Democrats, because this is what they do. You know, this is what they do. They don't care. They don't care. And them folks in Fulton County, they like to sweep stuff up under the rug. And I think they need to investigate finding Willis on a whole bunch of levels. But that's what I got, man. I appreciate y'all. Like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for tuning in.
XconMedia.